Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. Marked twice, loved once. Episode 6. Chapter 58. Nora's POV. We have to talk about this, Lolita argued, causing an angry groan to escape my lips. Lord Madison is our mate. I can't be wrong about it. What about Alpha Leo? I asked, and Lolita remained silent for a moment before responding. We have to meet him to get an answer for that. She replied, and I grunted, standing before a familiar building. Taking a deep breath, I stared at the house, a place filled with painful memories. If you don't want to go in, we can leave, Lolita suggested, but I shook my head and marched forward to the door. With a deep breath, I knocked on the door once, and it opened, revealing an unfamiliar girl. Nora, she greeted as if she knew me. Hi there, I said, and she flashed me a big smile. I'm better, the housekeeper, she spoke, stepping aside for me to enter. Nice meeting you, better, I flashed a quick smile and stepped into the house. As I looked around, I realized nothing had changed since I was last here. Everyone is upstairs in your mother's room, she announced, and I nodded before taking the stairs. Painful memories of this place played in my head like a movie, but I quickly pushed them aside. Those memories belonged to the past, and I wouldn't let them affect me. I reached my room door, stared at it briefly, and walked further to my mother's room. When I arrived at my mother's door, I knocked and waited for it to be answered. Within a few seconds, the door opened, and my father stood before me. Staring at him, I realized he had lost a lot of weight, perhaps due to my mother's illness. His beard looked rough and unkempt, and his sea blue eyes, which I inherited from him, looked dull and lifeless. Nora, he called. Hi, I'm here. Where is she? I spoke formally, ignoring the discomfort in my chest. He seemed hurt by my words and reaction, perhaps expecting a hug. It had been 2 years since we last saw each other, but I didn't want to get emotional. The naive Nora was long gone. She's inside, he said, stepping aside for me to go in. Ignoring his gaze, I entered the room and saw Mother lying on the bed, with Vera seated by her side. The moment Mother held my gaze, she flashed me a grateful smile, which I ignored as I walked up to her. Nora, you're here, Vera spoke in relief and stood up. I cast a brief gaze at her and realized something was different. She no longer had that alluring charm around her. Her eyes looked dull, and it was obvious she had lost a lot of weight, probably due to the death of her child. I wished I could pull her into a big hug and tell her everything would be okay, but I couldn't. Yes, I'm here, I responded in a harsh tone and shifted my gaze to Mother, who flickered a smile at me, something I couldn't remember her doing before. Thanks, Mother tried to speak, but I cut her off, saying, there's no need for that. I sat on the bed. Let's see what's wrong with you, I said, taking her hands, which felt extremely cold, causing me to worry because werewolves are usually warm. Sucking a deep breath, I closed my eyes and examined her. Can you see what's wrong? I asked Lolita, and she responded, yes, but you have to take the illness and gradually heal yourself. Her response caused a heavy sigh to leave my lips. This explained why other healers couldn't heal her, they were scared of taking her illness. No. I spoke in disapproval. I would have done it for anyone, but not her. With a frown, I opened my eyes and held her gaze. Her eyes were so weak that I didn't know what to say. Is something wrong? Father asked, scared, but I couldn't respond to him. Again, I held Mother's gaze and realized she knew my abilities weren't working. It's okay, you tried your best, thank you, she whispered and tiredly shut her eyes. Her words clenched my heart, and out of panic and impulse, I placed my hands on her chest and gave my wolf the go-ahead. I began taking the poison into my system and felt my body getting weak, but I didn't stop. Are you okay? I heard Father's worried voice. It was obvious he had gotten a sign that I was getting weak. Ignoring his words, I continued transmitting all the poison into my body until I realized I'd taken everything from her. I opened my eyes but realized my sight was blurry, but the healing had already started. I'll be fine, I said and managed to get to my feet, but my legs were weak. Are you okay? Vera asked in a caring tone, something I had never heard from her before. I'm fine. Can you all just stop talking and acting caring? It's really annoying, I spoke in a provoked tone and slowly made my way to the one-seater couch. I need a bottle of water, I spoke with a soft sigh and slowly closed my eyes. You will be fine within an hour, Lolita comforted me, causing a soft sigh to leave my lips. The room remained silent until Father handed a glass of water to me. Thanks, I said as I took the water and emptied the glass into my burning throat. Do you need another? Father asked, but I shook my head and moved in Mother's direction, who was now seated on the bed. Her hands are now warm, Vera spoke with a sigh of relief. I feel like I just got reborn, Mother spoke and flashed me a grateful smile. Thanks, she said with a genuine smile, which fluttered my heart, but I ignored it. All my life, I wanted that smile from her, but today I felt nothing. Are you okay? Vera asked, and I scoffed before responding, since when do you start caring for me? I asked, and she gulped guiltily. You don't have to act this nice to me. If you want anything from me or have anything to say to me, then just do it, I spoke harshly and looked away. Silence enveloped the whole room until Vera broke it. I believe you must have heard that I lost my daughter, she spoke, while I remained silent. She was perfectly fine, and just 2 days of illness, she died, she gulped in tears, causing a glint of sympathy in my chest. We called numerous healers, and none could tell what was wrong with her. Some even tried to take the illness, but they couldn't transmit, she sobbed out, while her body shook in pain. Within the space of 2 days, she died right in my arms, she mumbled in tears, causing a heavy sigh to leave my lips. Perhaps I could have helped. I thought to myself. After her death, Alpha Leo sent me away. You know, he never talked or touched me for the past 2 years, all because of you, Nora. He loves you so deeply and always stays in the library. According to him, your scent still lingers in the room, she announced. I scoffed, wondering why she was telling me all this. A few days ago, I went to see a seer, and she confirmed that the child was meant to die. Any offspring of Alpha Leo and me would never live past their 2nd year, she explained, sobbing and sniffing deeply. Nora, I'm so sorry for the pain I made you go through. You were really good to me, and all I could do was repay you with pure wickedness, she spoke, while I inhaled deeply. I never knew a day like this would come so quickly. I have a confession to make, she said, and I remained silent, waiting for her to speak. I realized Alpha Leo was developing feelings for you, so I put on your clothes and had relation with him in his drunken state. We had sex, but he thought it was you. I knew I wasn't in my safe period, so I made him release inside me, and that way, I could trap him with that child. It worked, she gulped, and I still remained silent. Every day, he would tell me how much he hates me and can't wait to send me away. But our child held him back, and when she died, he didn't hesitate to send me away. I remember his mother pressurized him to marry me, but he bluntly refused because his heart belonged to you. I was supposed to be happy with her words, but so many things have changed. He still loves you, Lolita spoke in my head, which I ignored. Why are you telling me all this, Vera? I asked, wondering where all this was heading. I want you to forgive me, Nora. I know it's hard, but I know you have a big heart, so different from mine, she spoke and stood to her feet. The truth is, since the age of 8, I have been so jealous of you. Her words made me furrow my eyebrows as I wondered what there was to be jealous of me. She was the perfect one, perfect body, perfect face. I may have the perfect body, but you are perfect in so many areas. You are beautiful, Nora, but you never seem to see it because you only look at your body, forgetting that your body is appealing to many. She came closer to where I sat and squatted before me, tears clouding her eyes. You are so perfect, Nora. Perfect in cooking, despite mother not teaching you. Perfect in academics, perfect with children and people. Every day of my life, I wished I could be you, but you never noticed it. People came to me because of my perfect body, but people are attracted to you because of your pure personality. I knew of so many lecturers who would tell me to be like you, but you never knew. Their words made me hate you even more. I hated why you were so perfect, and I decided to prove to you that despite being the perfect twin, I would take everything from you. But see where it has ended me, she gulped, while I scoffed, not able to believe what I had just heard. Please find a place in your big heart and forgive me, she pleaded, while I remained silent, not knowing what to say. Nora. Mother called, getting my attention. Can you find it in your heart to forgive me, she pleaded. You were just a child, and it wasn't your fault, I shouldn't have, it wasn't Nora, father interrupted, forcing my attention to him. It was Vera who left the car, he announced. Nora's POV what? Mother stammered, and I fixed my gaze on Dad, waiting for him to explain what he had just said. I'm sorry for keeping this secret from you, he spoke, and my impatience grew. What is going on? I asked, eager to understand. When your mother was hit by the car, a friend of mine happened to be in the area. He took your mother and both of you to the hospital and quickly called me. When I arrived at the hospital, I learned that your mother and Vera had been hospitalized. He took a deep breath while I furrowed my eyebrows, waiting for him to continue. My friend told me that Vera fainted upon witnessing the accident, and you were in the car, engrossed in a novel. He took a long breath and approached me. I'm so sorry, Nora, but the doctor advised me not to tell Vera anything that would hurt or scare her. So when your mother woke up the next day, I took you to see her, and the first thing you said was sorry, Mama. That's how your mother concluded that it was you, and I couldn't say anything, he explained. No. Mother yelled and left the bed. Tell me you're lying. It was Nora, right? I saw it, she paused, her eyes widening. No, no. She continued yelling, and then I realized that she must have realized it wasn't me she saw. No, no, she tried to speak, but I cut her off with a bitter chuckle, drawing everyone's attention to me. Wow! I clapped my hands slowly and rose to my feet. What a turn of events! I scoffed, still clapping. Allow me to commend you all on what a family you are to me, I said with a bitter tone, shifting my gaze to Father. Wow, Father, wow! I sarcastically praised, feeling pain in my heart. You made me take the blame for something I never did, just because you didn't want your precious daughter to experience the pain I went through. Despite witnessing how much I was suffering, you chose to remain silent. Why? Because I was the one deemed fit to endure it, not Vera. Because of you, I never got to experience a mother's love and support, and you knew you could have done something about it, but you didn't. Instead, you sat and watched. How were you able to sleep at night, Father? I asked, noticing a tear rolling down his cheek. And as if that wasn't enough, you refused to believe me when I told you that I did nothing with Lord Madison in the hotel, I added, observing the stunned look on Dad's face as he realized the man in the picture was Lord Madison. Congratulations, Father! You've just won the award for the best father in the world, I scoffed bitterly, shifting my gaze to Mother, who was sobbing loudly. Why the tears, Mother? I questioned. You shouldn't cry because no amount of tears can match the amount you've made me cry. I'm sorry, she sobbed, but I shook my head. No, Mother, being sorry is not enough. Being sorry can't erase the pain you put me through. Mother, you even made me question whether you were my biological mother. You punished me for something silly that I didn't even do. I'll leave you to live with that guilt. I turned to Vera, tears streaming down her cheeks. Heaven knows that I love you and would do anything for you, but all you showed me was hatred. You made sure to take everything from me, even my last hope of happiness. I pleaded with you and told you that you could take everything, but just leave Alpha Leo for me. But you didn't listen. Instead, when you realized he was falling for me, you decided to lure him into having sex with you. I took a deep breath to control my emotions so I wouldn't cry. I didn't want to give them the privilege of seeing me in tears. What saddens my heart the most in all of this is the death of an innocent child, but I hope you've learned your lesson. I paused and looked at each of them before shaking my head. You three deserve each other. With those words, I made my way to the door, ignoring their calls. I left the room, hurriedly descended the stairs, and exited the house. As soon as I stepped outside, a sigh of relief escaped my lips. I glanced at the house one last time before walking away. Hello, everyone. I heard Alpha Leo's voice in my head. Mate. Lolita howled loudly in my mind. This message is for all the healers, those within the pack and those who received our request. I want to thank you all for honoring my request, he spoke firmly. The sick people need immediate attention, and we can't waste time. So I urge all the healers to gather at the town square, where all the infected people will be. I will be expecting you all. He said and ended the mind link. He is still our mate, Lolita announced, but I didn't respond. Instead, I pondered in silence. How could it be possible for me to have two mates who happen to be cousins? The moon goddess definitely has a good reason for it, Lolita responded, while I shook my head with a frown. If I were to have a second mate, why did it have to be Lord Madison? It should have been someone else, and I would have easily chosen that person. You can still choose or have both. They are both attractive men, Lolita suggested, but I scoffed before replying, don't be ridiculous, Lolita. I don't know what games the moon goddess is playing with me, but one thing is clear, I want nothing to do with either of them. I declared those words as a vow, but deep down, something tells me I may be lying to myself. Alpha Leo's POV, your second chance mate? I asked, finding it difficult to believe what I had just heard from him. Yes, I didn't know until I met her a few hours ago, Madison responded, and I shook my head in disbelief. This can't be happening, it's not possible. She is still my mate, I argued, and Lord Madison stepped closer to me. Then I believe this will be a problem, Leo, he challenged, holding my gaze. You see, I let her go 2 years ago because I thought she wasn't mine to keep. But now that I know she's mine, I'm sorry, Leo, but I'm not letting go of her, he challenged, causing Ethan to howl in anger. She is now mine, Leo, and I won't let you have her so easily, he challenged and left the room while I slumped on the couch, struggling to understand what's happening. This can't be possible. How can this be possible? I asked myself repeatedly, but neither I nor my wolf could provide an answer. With a heavy sigh, I left the room and made my way to the library. I walked in and sat behind the desk. I picked up a book I was reading, which happened to be Nora's book. She released it 6 months ago, and I was among the first to get it, especially signed by her. Dropping the book heavily, I pulled open the drawer, took out a brown envelope, and opened it. Inside were different pictures of Nora from the past 2 years. You can call me a stalker because I hired men to give me news about her and even took pictures of her. I did all this because I couldn't reach her. I tried making a mind link with her, but she blocked me from having access. In order not to lose her, I hired men to watch over her, updating me on her movements in Francisco. For the past 2 years, I yearned to make things right, but something was stopping me, and that was my daughter. After her birth, I decided to do a DNA test in 3 hospitals in different countries, and it was confirmed that she was my daughter. When I realized this, I became shattered and confused. Firstly, if I send Vera away, she would take my little girl with her because I have no right to the child unless I marry her, which I wouldn't, despite my mother's questions. But after the death of my daughter, I decided to send her away and announce to everyone that she was never my mate. My mother felt heartbroken that I lied to her, but I needed to do what was right. And now that I wish to make things right, another obstacle has arisen. A knock came on the door, and I asked the person to come in. My beta, Jason, walked in with a heap of files in his hands. I knew I would find you here, he said as he dropped the stack of documents on the desk. Your signatures are needed on these, he spoke, and I nodded, resting my head on the headrest of the seat. Are you okay? He asked, and I released a soft sigh. You are still reading this book and looking at her pictures, he spoke, but I didn't give an answer. Why are you doing this to yourself? Why don't you go find her and make things right, he urged, but I shook my head because I knew it wasn't as easy as it seemed. It's not as easy as it seems, Jason. She can't just forgive me like that. I have caused her a lot of pain, and being sorry won't make up for it. I sighed deeply and picked up the first file my hand could reach. Everything will be fine, he assured me, and I nodded as he left. I immersed myself in work and only became distracted when the door opened, and Jason walked in. It's time to be at the town square. All the infected individuals are there, including the healers, Jason announced, and I closed the last document. Finally, we are going to meet her, Ethan spoke excitedly, but I wasn't excited about it. Instead, I felt scared and anxious, wondering how she would react if she gets to see me. Is the car ready? I asked, and Jason nodded. I stood up, put on my jacket and Jason and I left the library. We got into the car, and Jackson drove off. The drive to the town square was quiet as I pondered in thought, wondering what I would say to her when we meet. There are so many things I want to say to her, but I didn't know where to start. As we arrived at the town square, I could see the crowd gathering, filled with both infected individuals and healers. The atmosphere was tense, and I couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and fear. Stepping out of the car, I took a deep breath and adjusted my jacket, trying to gather my thoughts. Walking towards the center of the square, I could see the healers setting up their stations and preparing for the task at hand. The infected individuals stood together, their expressions a mix of hope and desperation. I glanced around, searching for her among the crowd, feeling both eager and apprehensive about meeting her. "Mate!" Ethan growled, forcing my attention in a particular direction. Finally, I spotted her, standing a few meters away. "Mine!" Ethan howled, forcing my steps toward her, which I obediently did. Her eyes briefly met mine, and I saw her flicker a frown at me before looking away. As I approached her, I could feel the weight of my mistakes pressing upon me. I wanted to reach out and hold her, to apologize for everything, but I knew it wasn't that simple. There was no easy way to make up for the pain I had caused her. As I made my way over to Nora, I felt my heart pounding in my chest with nervousness. I had been waiting for this moment for weeks, and now that it was finally here, I couldn't help but feel scared, wondering how she would react. But just as I was about to take the final steps toward her, my eyes locked onto something that made me freeze in my tracks. Out of nowhere, Madison came and stood beside Nora, giving her a bright smile. Alpha Leo's POV pain. That was the first thing I felt upon seeing him next to her. "Mine!" Ethan howled possessively, and I fought the urge to force my way towards them. Instead, I held myself back and stared in their direction. She briefly glanced at me, and with a frown, she walked away from Madison while Madison held my gaze. "Alpha, are you okay?" "Everyone is waiting for you," Jason whispered, and I nodded, trying to gather my thoughts. "Can you give the go-ahead?" "I'm not in the right frame of mind," I said, and he nodded, understanding my request. He guided me to a seat that looked like a throne. I took a seat, and all of my subjects lowered their heads in respect. Jason took the stage in front and gave the signal on my behalf. Infected children gathered in one station while adults and youth occupied the rest. I scanned the area, searching for Nora, and found her at the children's section. "Mine!" Ethan howled, and a big smile appeared on my face. She hadn't changed a bit. As I watched her interacting with the kids, I noticed Madison approaching and standing beside her. Seeing him sit on the floor next to Nora, choosing to help heal the children like her. With an angry groan, I felt miserable in my seat, wishing I possessed the gift of healing. Perhaps then I could be with her instead of being stuck in this wretched position. I observed as they held the hands of children and began healing them, while an ache of pain throbbed in my chest. People who received their healing approached me with gratitude, but my gaze remained fixed on something else: Nora and Madison conversing with each other. I noticed him saying something to her, and she nodded, igniting a surge of anger and jealousy within me. Then, I witnessed her vomiting blood, and instinctively, I stood up, but Jason held me back. "It's normal. All the healers are spitting out the poison," he said, as if he had read my thoughts. Curiously, I shifted my gaze to the other healers and noticed that they too were spitting out blood. With a deep sigh, I sat back down and watched Nora, still utilizing her abilities while seated beside Madison. Jason must have noticed my discomfort, so he stopped the people from coming to me to say their gratitude, rather he received it himself, preventing anyone from coming to me. I continued to watch Nora, and saw her bright smile enchanting the children, making them laugh and forgetting their afflictions. "She is perfect and will make an outstanding Luna," Ethan praised, and I agreed with him. Nora possessed the qualities of a great Luna: caring, loving, patient, and selfless. But I had been foolish not to realize this earlier, and now that I did, it was already too late. With a frustrated sigh, I ran both hands through my hair, contemplating how to make things right. Several hours passed, and everyone received their healing. I watched as Nora weakly stood up, and Madison supported her by helping her to her feet, a duty that should have been mine. Everyone is done. Should I thank the healers on your behalf? Jason suggested, but I shook my head and stood up. Thank you, healers, for your incredible work. You have not only healed the people of this pack but also healed this pack itself, bringing hope and comfort to us. Today, we celebrate you. The healers looked up, their faces reflecting surprise and joy. Tonight, we will celebrate in your honor. Each of you will receive gifts as tokens of our gratitude. Financial support will also be provided to those in need. You truly deserve it, I announced, uplifting the mood among the healers. I caught Nora's gaze, but she quickly averted her eyes. Join us tonight as we come together to acknowledge your dedication and the profound impact you have on our lives. Let this celebration serve as a reminder that you are cherished and respected. I concluded my speech, and the healers applauded, their smiles beaming with appreciation. I nodded to them and noticed Nora and Madison leaving. I'll be back, I informed Jason, hastening my steps to meet up with Nora and block her path. Mine, Ethan howled in my head as I locked eyes with her captivating sea blue gaze. Alpha Leo, greetings, she greeted me formally, which irritated me. Nora, we need to talk, I said, glaring at Madison with anger. I don't think there's anything to talk about, Alpha Leo, she replied, shaking her head. I pleaded, Nora, we have a lot to discuss. She scoffed and shook her head. Why, Alpha Leo? What could you possibly have to say to me? Aren't you concerned about being seen talking to a plus-size, unattractive girl? She spat angrily, and I took a deep breath. Both of you should just leave me alone, she yelled, walking away. I stared at Madison with anger before following Nora. My heart clenched in my chest as I hurriedly walked after her, desperately trying to catch up with her. Finally reaching her, I reached out and grabbed her wrist, pulling her into a secluded corner. Nora, wait! I pleaded. She spun around, her eyes flashing with anger. What do you want? She spat. I want to talk, I said, pleading with her. Please, just give me a chance to make things right. She shook her head, trying to pull her wrist free. No, I don't want to hear it, she said, her voice low and fierce. You did what you did, and you can't take it back now. But I wasn't ready to give up. I tightened my grip on her wrist, pulling her closer to me. Please, Nora, I said again. I didn't mean it. I love you, and I don't want to lose you. I spoke sincerely, and she frowned. Let go of me, Alpha Leo, she yelled, but I didn't. Alpha Leo, let go of me, she demanded and tried to release her wrist from my grip. She told you to let her go, Madison yelled from behind and forcefully pushed me away, causing Ethan to fuel in anger. What are you doing here, Madison? I asked through gritted teeth, bringing out my fangs. She doesn't want to listen to you, Leo. She doesn't want you. He spat back, revealing his own fangs, ready to attack. With a groan, I moved towards him, but Nora blocked my path, separating me from Madison. Stop, both of you. Stop this madness! She yelled, locking eyes with me before turning to Madison. Someone might see this, she exclaimed. Let them see. I'm not ashamed to fight for you, Madison growled, but she retorted, but I don't want anyone to fight for me, and shifted her attention back to me. We held each other's gaze, and without needing to be told, I took back my fangs. She observed me for a moment, then turned to Madison, who followed suit. She closed her eyes and tiredly massaged her forehead before opening them again. I have a plan to put an end to all this, but first, let's go somewhere and talk, she said, and I nodded in agreement. With a heavy sigh, she glanced at both of us and began walking away, while I glared at Madison before following her. We trailed behind Nora as I make a mind link with Jason, instructing him to return to the mansion and inform Edwin to pick me up once I was done. Nora led the way, while Madison and I walked in silence. I ran my fingers through my hair, pondering how things had changed so drastically between us. Madison and I were once as close as brothers, but now we see ourselves as enemies. Nora guided us into a coffee shop, where she took a seat and we sat across from her. After placing our orders, she remained silent until the coffee arrived. When I offered to pay, the waitress refused the money. But Nora took out some cash from her purse and stretched it to the waitress. "This is for mine, take it," she urged, and the waitress stared at me and I gestured her to take the money. Madison and I also paid for our coffee. I focused my attention on Nora, observing her as she took a sip of her coffee and drew a deep breath. I noticed her briefly close her eyes, and without being told, I knew she was gathering the courage to utter what she was about to say. "I'll set up a competition between the two of you, and the winner, after 3 months, will be accepted as my mate," she spoke, causing a nervous gulp to pass down my throat. "But there are rules and requests that need to be followed." She paused and calmly sipped her coffee before setting the cup back down. "It's a competition, and once I establish the rules and regulations, if any of you refuse to participate, I will choose the one who is willing to continue with the competition." Her threat hung in the air, causing Madison and me to exchange a tense glance. Nora's POV: who would have thought that I would be seated before the most influential men in different supernatural races? Nora, the bullied plus-size girl who hides and cries in her pillow and in the women's bathroom, is now seated before these great men, ready to give out instructions. "You can do this," Lolita encouraged, and I sipped my coffee while ignoring their curious gazes on me. "There are rules, regulations, and benefits in this contest," I said, and saw Lord Madison furrow his brow, but I looked away and continued. "I'll set the rules and regulations, and if both of you are fine with it, then the contest will start from now," I said, shifting my gaze to both Lord Madison and Alpha Leo. "What is this contest?" Alpha Leo asked, and I turned my gaze to Lord Madison. "Lord Madison," I called out, "the contest will be held here. Can you stay here for 3 months? You can leave if something important comes up, but you have to be available on your designated weekends," I said, and he furrowed his eyebrows before asking, "My weekends?" he asked, and I nodded. "I'll be spending the weekends at each of your houses, hope you get what I mean," I said, and he nodded. Taking a deep breath, I gathered myself again. "You are doing a great job," Lolita encouraged, and I nodded. "So?" I asked, waiting for their response. "I have an apartment here, so that wouldn't be an issue," Lord Madison announced, and I nodded. I shifted my gaze to Alpha Leo, who had been quiet and lost in thought, staring at the cup of tea before him. "Mine," Lolita whispered in my head, causing me to feel worried for him, but I quickly brushed it off. "Are you with us, Alpha Leo?" I asked, and he nodded, still staring at the tea. I observed him for a moment and held Lord Madison's gaze. "What is this contest about?" Lord Madison asked, and I ran my fingers along the rim of my cup before speaking. "I'll spend 2 days with each of you during the week, and on Fridays, I'll spend the weekend with the one who has me for that weekend. I'll keep rotating it until the 3 months are over," I said, and both men remained silent, but I continued. "This way, I will get to know both of you and will score you every Monday. Don't worry, you both will be together when I give the scores. The one with the highest score at the end of the contest wins, I concluded and relaxed back in my seat, waiting for a response from either of them. The three of us remained silent until Alpha Leo spoke. "What are the rules and regulations?" he asked, and I took a deep breath before leaning forward on the table. "Rule number 1, there will be no fighting between the two of you. The one who initiates the fight will have 20 marks deducted from his score," I warned, shifting my gaze to Alpha Leo and then to Lord Madison. "Rule number 2, you are not allowed to announce me as your mate until the contest is over. If you win, then you can do it," I said, and the two remained silent. "Rule number 3, if I'm spending the weekend with one of you, then the other must make sure not to communicate with me until it's Monday. If any of you fail to do so, 20 marks will be deducted from your score," I announced, and they still remained silent. "Rule number 4, no pretense when I'm with you. I want to see and experience the real you. If any of you pretend, I will know, and that won't reflect well in your rating." I took a deep breath, trying to compose myself. It wasn't easy giving instructions to such highly capable men. "I want you to show both your good and bad sides to me. If you're angry, show it. If you're happy, show it. If I do something you don't like, speak up, but no pretending," I instructed, taking another sip of my coffee and exhaling deeply. "As a reward, you are allowed to touch me. By touch, I mean we can kiss and engage in other forms of affection, but there will be no relation." I maintained eye contact with both of them, noticing their expressionless faces. "If any of you lose control and engage with me, you will be automatically disqualified," I announced, witnessing Alpha Leo's widened eyes. "Yes, automatic disqualification. So, you must exercise self-control. No matter how intense the make-out sessions become, ensure they do not lead," I warned, leaning back in my seat. "Good job," Lolita praised, while I continued to stare at the two men, who exchanged glances. "Do you think they will accept this silly game?" I asked my wolf. "Yes, they will," she responded confidently. "Do any of you want to back out or have anything to say?" I asked, shifting my gaze between both of them. Lord Madison was the first to speak. "When do we start?" he asked. I turned to Alpha Leo, who remained oddly quiet. "Alpha Leo, don't you have something to say?" I inquired, and he let out a heavy sigh before speaking. "There's nothing to be said. It's my fault if only," he trailed off, shaking his head. I waited for him to continue, but he didn't say anything further. "He's hurting," Lolita declared, but I ignored it and faced Lord Madison. "Tomorrow is Friday, which means I will have to spend the weekend with one of you. Who should it be?" I asked, shifting my gaze between them. Nora's POV. We all remained silent as I waited for someone to speak, but none of them spoke up. I watched as they stared at each other for a moment, then back at me, still not uttering a word. With a heavy sigh, I looked around and waved at the waitress, who hurried over and lowered her head to both Alpha Leo and Lord Madison. "Can I borrow a coin from one of you?" "I'll return it," I requested, and she nodded, then went to fetch it. Within a minute, she returned and handed the coin to me before leaving. I gazed at both of them for a while before speaking. "Alpha Leo and Lord Madison, do either of you have something to say?" I asked and Lord Madison responded, "I'll choose tails." I nodded and turned to face Alpha Leo. "That means you are going with heads," I informed him, and he nodded in agreement. With a deep breath, I flipped the coin onto my palm, removed my hand, and realized that the coin showed tails, making Lord Madison the winner. It seems I'll be spending the weekend with you, I said, facing Lord Madison, who had a relieved look on his face. He seems happy, Lolita whispered, and I looked away. I shifted my gaze to Alpha Leo and saw that he wore a blank expression, making it difficult to discern his mood. I held his gaze for a moment before calling the waitress's attention and handing her the coin back. The three of us remained silent, lost in our thoughts. I delved into deep reflection, wondering if I had made the right decision with this contest. When I witnessed them almost attacking each other a few moments ago, I felt scared and panicked. If they could think of attacking each other in my presence, I feared what they might do when I'm not around. Although I knew this contest was ridiculous, but it seemed like the best decision to make. I believed that by the end of the 3 months, I would be able to choose the right one among them and perhaps find love and the life I had dreamed of. When should I pick you up? Lord Madison asked, breaking the silence. I'll give you the address and time, I replied and stood up. Do we have a deal? I asked, staring at both of them, and they both nodded. May the best man win, I said, lowering my head respectfully to them, and walked away. Good job, Lolita praised. Thanks, I responded, and hailed a taxi. A few minutes later, I arrived at the hotel, quickly took a bath, and changed into a loose shirt and sweatpants. Sitting on the bed, I called Maxwell for a video call, and he answered after the second ring. Hi, my hero, he teased. I heard the healing process was a success, he said, and I nodded. Father also told me everything. He wanted me to plead on their behalf, but you know I won't do that, he said, while I flickered a sad yet grateful smile. For a moment, I had forgotten about them. How are you doing? He asked, and I took a deep breath before responding. I'm doing well, I mumbled. Something else is bothering you. What is it? He asked, and I released a heavy sigh before explaining everything to him, leaving no details out. Wow, he exclaimed, while I sighed. What you did was the right thing to do. You can't reject them both, and you can't choose one when you know nothing about them, he said, and I nodded, relieved by his words. For a moment, I had doubted my decision, but hearing this from him relieved my stress. Now you have to work with your head, not your heart. There should be no cheating on your part while giving the scores, he advised, and I nodded in agreement. I hope you choose the right mate at the end of the day, he said, and I responded with a smile. Thanks for everything, Maxwell. I don't know what I would have done without you, I expressed my gratitude, and he smiled in return. You're my only family, and I feel lucky to have such an amazing big brother, I praised him, and he chuckled. Stop it. I'm just older by a year and 6 months, he scoffed, while I chuckled and shook my head. Go to bed. You have a lot on your plate, he told me, and I nodded. I blew him a kiss and ended the call. With a heavy sigh, I lay on the bed and contemplated where I would stay. Staying in a hotel for such period didn't seem great to me, as I was already feeling homesick. Give Dora a call. Lolita suggested, and I realized that I had forgotten to inform her of my presence in town. I dialed her number, and after the third ring, she picked up. Nora, she exclaimed. Dora, hi babe, I greeted. I'm in town. Oh my gosh, Nora. That's amazing. Dora exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. How long are you staying? We need to catch up. I'm actually here for a while, I replied. Wow, where are you staying? She asked, concerned because she knew I wouldn't stay at my parents' apartment. In a hotel, I responded. Well, in the meantime, how about you stay with me? My apartment is big enough, and we'll have a blast catching up, she suggested. A surge of relief washed over me. That sounds perfect, Dora. I'm already feeling homesick, and staying in a hotel for 3 months would literally kill me. Consider it settled, then. Dora exclaimed happily. I can't wait to have you here. We'll make it like old times. I smiled gratefully. Thank you, Dora. You're the best. I'll let you know when I'll be there, and we can plan some fun activities. I'm looking forward to it, Nora, she replied warmly. Thanks, Dora. Talk to you soon, I said and ended the call with a sigh of relief. I lay back on the bed and forced myself to sleep, ignoring the fact that Alpha Leo was hosting a party for all the healers tonight. Just as I was about to fall asleep, a knock came on the door. Curious to know who it was, I left the bed and approached the door. Slowly, I turned the doorknob, revealing a familiar face I hadn't expected to see. It was Alpha Leo, his normally composed expression edged with worry. Without uttering a word, he stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. Alpha Leo's POV. What are you doing here, Alpha Leo? She asked in a displeased tone. Can I talk to you for just a few minutes? I know the contest is starting tomorrow, so I'm not breaking any rules, I said, watching her stare at me with a frown before going to the bed and sitting on it. You have just 5 minutes, she murmured, and I nodded gratefully, still standing by the door. Nora. I called out, but she didn't look my way. I just want you to know that there is no day that passes that I don't regret what I said and did to you. I know there is nothing I could say or do to make you forgive me so easily, but I just want you to know how sorry I am. Being sorry won't change a thing, she cut in. I know, and I don't want it to change anything, I said, and she looked up at me. I did not come to tell you to stop this contest, I paused and took a step closer to her. I'm going to do this contest, and if you don't find me worthy at the end of it, I'll be pained and heartbroken. But I'll be at ease knowing that you are with a good man who perhaps would treat you better than I said while she furrowed her eyebrows before getting on her feet. Don't you think it's too early to declare yourself a loser? Are you scared or giving up already? She asked, but I shook my head and held her gaze. I'm not scared, Nora, but you know all my life I've been winning, so I might not be lucky this time, I said, and she didn't say a word but held my gaze. Mine. Ethan howled, but I held myself and kept him at bay. Good night, I'll see you on Monday, I said, and without looking back, I left the room. I left the hotel with a heavy heart. My eyes were teary, but I held back the tears and got into the car, started it up, and drove off. This is your fault, Leonard, Ethan yelled. If only you had listened to me, this wouldn't have resulted in this. She would be ours, and perhaps Madison would have gotten another girl. My wolf spoke angrily, causing me to hit the steering wheel of the car in anger. Can you stop blaming me? I yelled out. I get it, I messed up, and I'm paying for it in the most painful way. I know all this, can you please stop reminding me of it? It's killing me. I yelled, hitting the steering wheel of the car and parked in the corner of the road. I was losing control, and I knew it was not safe to continue driving. With a deep sigh, I closed my eyes as the flames within me heated up, but I controlled it and got out of the car. I ran my fingers through my hair as I sweat profusely. I crossed the road to the woods, walked a bit further into the forest before taking off my clothes. With a grunt, I changed into my wolf form, and Ethan took over. He raced deeper into the woods while I followed his direction, with one person playing in my head. I could picture her beautiful eyes, her captivating smile when she smiled at the kids. Her heartfelt laughter that is so consuming that no matter how angry you are, you'll find yourself smiling at her. But I'm about to lose her because of my stupidity. What was I thinking when I rejected her at just first glance? Why did it take me a while to realize that she was a gift to me? Instead, I let my teenage fear get a grip on me. With panting breath, Ethan howled loudly and repeatedly hit his 4 feet on the ground before he finally stopped. We stood there for a moment until I believed both Ethan and I were calm, then I directed us back to where I had left my clothes. I shifted into my human form, got dressed, and left the woods. Despite the freezing weather, I was sweating profusely, soaking my shirt. Letting out a heavy sigh, I reached the place where my car was parked and noticed one of my cars pulled up beside it. Jason and a few pack warriors came out of the jeep. "Alpha!" Jason called as he walked up to me. "Are you okay? We heard your howl, it was loud and, it's okay, I'm fine. Please tell everyone that everything is fine," I spoke weakly, trying to get into my car. However, he stopped me. "I'll drive you." "You can't drive like this," he said, and I nodded. I sat in the back seat and rested my head on the headrest. A few minutes into the drive, Jason spoke up. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked. I sighed and remained silent for a moment, but then I asked him the question that had been bothering me. "Jason," I called, and he hummed in response. "I have known you since childhood, and I know that you were never gay or bi. But your mate happens to be a boy. How were you able to accept him and love him at first glance? Why didn't you freak out and reject him because he was not what you wanted?" I asked. Jason remained silent for a moment before responding. "You want to know the truth, Alpha?" he asked, and I nodded even though he couldn't see me. At first, I freaked out when I met him for the first time. I was furious and angry at the moon goddess for mating me to a man when she was fully aware that I was never into men. He paused and continued, "But I didn't show it to him, nor did I reject him instantly. However, I knew I would eventually reject him." "So, what happened?" I asked curiously. I greeted him and saw the big smile on his face when he realized I wasn't rejecting him. We went out on several occasions, and one day he opened up and told me that he knew I wasn't into guys and that I would reject him someday. But he was grateful that I didn't make him feel bad. He was the one who initiated the rejection. He told me he had a role to play in a movie and would be out of the country for 2 months, and when he came back, we should reject each other. I agreed, and he left, but as he went away, I realized I had grown so fond of him. A day wouldn't pass without me wanting to hear his voice or see his face. I began having sleepless nights as the day grew closer for him to return, and when he came back, we couldn't reject each other because we had fallen for each other. I realized that I had fallen for him, but I didn't feel attracted to him when we first met. It was only after I got to know him and spent time with him that I realized I loved him. Jason finished speaking, and a tear fell on my cheek. If only I were as wise as Jason, then I wouldn't have found myself in such situations. "I know why you rejected her and didn't want her. The painful memories of your past flashed before you, causing worry and fear, which was unnecessary," he said as I sighed and closed my eyes. "But don't worry, you have the chance to make things right again," he encouraged, but I shook my head. "It's not as easy as it seems. Maybe it would have been easy if it was just me in the picture, but this time I'm not the only one involved." "Lord Madison?" he asked. "Yes, she is also Madison's second chance mate," I murmured. Jason remained silent before speaking. "So, "What are your plans?" he asked, but I couldn't provide an answer. "Don't tell me you're giving up," he urged, and I sighed heavily before responding. "She hates me, Jason, and there's Madison, who hasn't wronged her like I did. So, tell me, how do I get a chance in this?" I grumbled, tiredly massaging my forehead to soothe the burning ache in my head. "Alpha Leo, I don't see you as someone who gives up so easily. What has changed?" he asked, and with a heavy sigh, I replied, "I'm going to lose her, Jason. I can feel it in my bones." I spoke honestly and released a soft sigh. Lord Madison's POV constantly, I checked my wristwatch, monitoring as the time went by, yet no phone call from Nora, not even a text message. "Calm down, Darren," my wolf urged, causing a heavy sigh to leave my lips. Just as I was about to check my wristwatch again, the beeping of my phone caught my attention. Quickly, I reached for it and saw that it was a text message from Nora. After reading it, I stood up, picked up my jacket from the couch, and made my way out of the room. I took the stairs to the sitting room and called out to Louis. "Is the room ready?" I asked, and he nodded. "Make sure everything is in order," I said, and walked away. I entered my car and drove off. As I drove, tension filled my entire body. I have never been this tense in my life. I was anxious to make things right and not make any mistakes. I have lost one, and I won't lose another. After a few minutes of driving, I arrived in front of a hotel and found Nora already waiting for me. With a smile, I got out of the car and walked up to her. As I made my way to her, I couldn't take my eyes off her. She was dressed in a pair of black, tight jeans and a red hoodie. Her black hair was let loose and fell on her shoulders. Her eyes held mine, and I couldn't help but smile at her. "Nora." "Good morning, Lord Madison," she greeted, with her head bowed. "Please call me Madison," I said with a smile, but she didn't respond. "Can we leave?" she asked. "Yes," I nodded and tried to take the suitcase from her, but she refused. "Let me," I urged, but she shook her head. "I can carry my own suitcase, but thanks for offering to help," she said with a quick smile and began walking towards the direction of the car while I walked behind her. While walking behind her, my gaze fell on her thick curvaceous rounded in the jeans, but I groaned in frustration and looked away. We both got into the car, and I drove off. A few minutes into the drive, I spoke up. "What are the things you would like us to do this weekend?" I asked, and she shrugged her shoulders. "It's your weekend, do whatever you want," she said and looked away. It was obvious she didn't want to talk much, but I wouldn't keep quiet. "I'm sorry," I apologized, but she remained quiet. "I know that the words I said to you hurt you so much, and I truly apologize for it," I added, and she still remained silent. "But I want you to know that all those words I said to you, I didn't mean any of it. I said all that because I felt guilty about my feelings for you. I felt it was wrong to fall for a woman who belongs to my cousin. I belong to no one," she cut in, and I nodded before stopping the car in front of my apartment. As I turned off the engine, I looked in her direction, and she held my gaze. "Back then, you loved me, Nora. What went wrong?" I asked, waiting for a response. Lord Madison POV. I waited for her to say something, but she remained silent, which got me frustrated. "Please say something," I pleaded. "There is nothing to say, Lord Madison. If you believed that I loved you then you can make me love you again," she said, and without waiting for my response, she opened the car door and got out while I did the same. Louis came out of the car and exchanged greetings with Nora like old-time friends before offering to help with the luggage, which she accepted. We entered the house, and I watched her scan the room before looking back at me. "Let me show you your room," I said, and she furrowed her eyebrows. "My room?" she asked, and I nodded. "We are sharing the same room," she said. "I thought you were already aware," she spoke, but I quickly nodded. "I just thought you might want some space," I said, but she scoffed and folded her arms. "There is nothing like that, Lord Madison. Please show me our room," she said, and I nodded before leading the way up the stairs. We climbed the stairs and entered the master bedroom. I watched her walk around the room, taking in everything before dropping the backpack she carried on her shoulders and placing it on the table. "It's beautiful," she praised, referring to the room. "Thanks," I said and made my way to her. I moved closer and cupped her face with both hands. "But not as beautiful as you are," I said, staring into her eyes. "Mine." Darren howled in my head, and I lost control, slamming my lips onto hers. I expected her to push me away, but she didn't. Instead, she wrapped her hands around my neck and deepened the kiss. I groaned between the kiss, pulling her closer by the waist and kissing her passionately. As we kissed, I felt all the dormant parts of me come back to life. Everything about her aroused me, and I couldn't help but lift her up from the floor, her legs skillfully wrapped around my waist. While we kissed, I guided us to the bed and gently laid her down. She lay on the bed with her back, and I lowered myself onto her, kissing her hungrily. Everything about her turned me on: her body, her scent, and the soft moans she released in the kiss. But I knew I had to stop. With a groan, I broke the kiss and held her gaze. I could swear that desire for me lingered in her eyes, and I wished I could have her so badly, but I knew the rules. "You are something else, Nora," I pecked her lips before leaving the bed. However, I made sure to turn my back to her so she wouldn't see the bulge in my pants. I was already turned on. I walked to the mini fridge, took out a bottle of water, and gulped it down, trying to calm my overly excited wolf. With a sigh, I looked down at my pants and realized the bulge was no longer invisible. I turned in Nora's direction and saw her focused on the screen of her laptop. I watched as she fixed her eyes on the laptop screen and typed skillfully. "Are you writing?" I asked as I approached her. "No, I'm just responding to emails," she responded, and I nodded. "Did you manage to calm it down?" she asked, her gaze leaving the laptop screen and meeting mine. "What?" I asked with furrowed eyebrows. "That," she shifted her eyes down to my pants and looked away. With a chuckle, I shook my head, sat on the couch, and watched her type. As I stared at her, I realized so many things had changed about her. From the way she speaks to the way she looks me in the eyes, it shows that she has groomed herself into a confident woman, and I love it. "Should I pose for a picture?" she asked while closing the laptop. "I would like to take one with you," I responded and stood to my feet. I made my way to her, sat on the bed, and folded my legs like she did. "It's Friday, so we are going clubbing," I said, and she nodded, but not excited about it. "Don't you like the idea?" I asked, but she shook her head and shrugged her shoulders. "I'm not a club person, but I'd love to try it," she said. "I can change it, we can go somewhere else," I suggested, but she shook her head. "No, it's okay. I'd love to go with you," she responded with a smile, and I couldn't stop myself from smiling back. "Are you hungry? Do you need anything?" I asked, but she shook her head and lay on the bed with her back, her eyes on the ceiling. I stared at her and realized she was lost in thoughts, and I couldn't stop myself from asking. "Do you mind sharing your thoughts?" I asked, also lying beside her, my gaze fixed on the ceiling. She remained silent, and when I thought she wouldn't reply, she finally spoke. "I'm picturing what my life would be like 5 years from now," she spoke with concern etched on her face. "And what did you see?" I asked, moving my gaze towards her direction, waiting for a response. "Nothing, I saw nothing." "It's blank," she said with a frown and a hint of disappointment in her voice. I moved closer to her, placed my left elbow on the bed and gently turned her face towards me with my right hand. "Let me paint a picture for you," I said, and she seemed confused but I continued. "You will have a great career, married to a man who loves you so much, and you'll have kids, probably 2 or 3, 3? Within 5 years?" she asked with a scoff, and I nodded. "You love kids, and I love kids too," I said, while she rolled her eyes and looked away. "But most importantly, you will be extremely happy," I added, and she turned to hold my gaze. Her eyes were filled with words that she wanted to say but she was holding back. "That's a nice vision you have there," she murmured and left the bed. "I want to take a tour around the house," she requested, and I tried to leave the bed, but she stopped me. "I believe Louis can show me around," she said, and I nodded. It was obvious she wanted a moment away from me. I watched her leave the room and lay back on the bed. "You are worried?" Darren asked, and I hummed. "She doesn't feel at ease with me," I said with a sigh, and Darren remained silent for a moment before saying, "One step at a time, don't rush it," he said, and I nodded. I left the bed, walked to the bar, and took out a bottle of wine. I filled up a glass and sipped from it. "Calm down, you are not the type of person that is easily tensed." "What's wrong?" Darren asked and I released a heavy sigh before responding. "This time is different, Darren. This time I'm competing with Leo, and you know what that means." A few hours later, I was already dressed in a black suit and was on a call with an investor when I heard footsteps from the stairs. I shifted my gaze towards it and saw Nora descending the staircase with effortless grace, her attire captivating my attention. She wore a short jean skirt that hugged her curves and a bodycon top, perfectly tucked into the skirt, emphasizing her figure. Her black hair flowed freely over her shoulders, adding an air of allure. Unable to resist, my eyes traveled down her exposed legs, taking in their smoothness and the subtle definition they held. I couldn't help but appreciate how attractive they were. My focus wavered from the phone call, the words slipping away as Nora's presence commanded my attention. With a mix of curiosity and admiration, I watched her climb down the stairs. The call became a distant murmur in my ear, and I hurriedly ended it, giving the investor an excuse to end the call. "Nora." "Lord Madison," she responded. "You look so beautiful," I commended and placed a kiss on her forehead before moving away. "Thank you, and you are not looking bad yourself," she praised while I smiled. "Shall we?" I asked, bringing forth my hand, which she took with a smile. We walked beside each other as we left the house. I opened the car for her and watched her go in before entering the driver's seat. The drive was silent, but a few minutes into it, Nora spoke up. "After the death of your first mate, have you been with another woman?" she asked, and I remained silent, not knowing how to say it to her. After saying those words to her 2 years ago, I felt heartbroken, frustrated, and in pain. I went clubbing for the first 2 months, but I stopped when I realized I have to take hold of myself. "I'm still waiting for an answer, Lord Madison," she said, and I gulped before saying, "Yes." Nora's POV yes. He responded and I gulped, but went further to ask, was it after you left? I asked again and heard him release a heavy sigh. Can we please not talk about this, he pleaded, and his words had already given me his answer. Sure, I responded and looked outside the window. My heart clenched at the thought of him being with another woman, but he claims he was mourning his mate and distancing himself from me. I believe there were hot slender women, I blurted out with jealousy and cursed myself for saying it. Lord Madison didn't say a word but remained silent until the car pulled into a club. He left the car, but before he could get to my side of the car, I had already opened the door and came out of it. The look in his eyes told me he wasn't happy about it, but he didn't say a word. Shall we? He asked, and I nodded. We walked side by side as we approached the entrance, which was guarded by 2 bouncers. Welcome, they both greeted and respectfully lowered their heads before letting us in. Lord Madison guided me through the lively club, with the sound of music and laughter filling the air. People danced on the dance floor, drinks in hand, enjoying the vibrant atmosphere. As we made our way through the crowd, heads turned, and whispers followed. I believed they were surprised to see Lord Madison with a woman. Let's go this way, Lord Madison said, and led me to a door guarded by 2 bouncers. As they saw us approach, they lowered their heads and opened the door. Lord Madison stepped in, and I followed. When we entered, I realized we were inside a private lounge. Soft music tinkled in my ears, and the dim lights made me feel more comfortable. At least no one would see me properly. The cool air conditioning hit me, and I breathed deeply. As I walked further into the hall, I saw a group of men seated around a round table, throwing their bets. They looked intense and focused, their eyes fixed firmly on the table. The sound of rolling dice and shuffling cards filled the room, enticing me even more. I also noticed the ladies who were dancing around the table, their bodies moving in unison to the music. They were wearing nothing but high heels and shimmering lingerie. Let's have a seat over there, Lord Madison said, directing me to a couch with a table in front of it. With a weak smile, I followed him, and we both took our seats. This place is nice, I said with a smile, looking around. I'm glad you like it, he spoke coldly and rang the bell on the table. I looked his way and noticed he was looking everywhere but at me. It was obvious he was avoiding me. He's angry, Lolita announced. At me? I asked. No, at himself, she responded, forcing me to look his way. Lord Madison. I called, and for the first time since we stepped out of the car, he looked my way. What are your orders? He asked, and I remained silent, only holding his gaze. When he realized I wouldn't give an answer, he turned back to the server and placed an order for us. When the server left, he still didn't look at me but rather his eyes were fixed on the people playing the game. I knew his thoughts had drifted far. Lord Madison. I called out again, and he looked in my direction. I'm sorry for asking those questions. I shouldn't have, I apologized, but he remained silent and looked away. He poured our drinks into 2 glasses and handed one to me, which I took and took a sip from. Once again, he looked away, completely ignoring me, and I hated it. Lord Madison, if you have something to say, please say it, I demanded, and this time he didn't stay quiet. You've changed a lot, Nora, and it's not your fault, he grumbled, taking a large gulp of champagne before continuing. The brutality that has been shown to you has turned you into someone else, and the sad part is that I played a role in it, he spoke with a hurtful tone, and I gulped, emptying my glass. I'm sorry, he said, and I took a deep breath to stop myself from crying. Excuse me, I would like to use the restroom, I said, and without waiting for a response, I stood up and hurried away. I entered the restroom and stood before a mirror, my eyes clouded with tears, and this time I couldn't stop them from falling. I let the tears fall freely as I stared at my reflection in the mirror, remembering the painful past. Nora, my wolf, Lolita, called. You haven't changed a bit, Nora. You've just locked up your heart because you don't want to get hurt again. But that doesn't mean you're still not that caring and kind-hearted girl I know. You are still my perfect Nora, but you don't want to show it to everyone, and I believe it's for the best so that no one would take you for granted, Lolita encouraged. Now wipe off those tears from your cheeks and go out there, she urged, and I did as told. After a few minutes, I walked out of the women's room and returned to Lord Madison. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said those words to you, he apologized, guilt evident in his eyes. But I smiled at him and called the attention of the server. Nora, he called, but I snapped, can we just enjoy tonight? Lord Madison's POV, I watched her finish the first and second bottle of beer, but when she tried opening the third one, I stopped her and called the attention of the server. I paid the bill and told Nora we were leaving, and she didn't object to it. We walked out of the club and both got into the car. The drive was silent, while I occasionally stared at her and saw that she was looking outside the window. Are you okay? I asked, and she nodded. You sure? I asked, and she nodded. All right. I heaved a deep breath and focused my attention on the road. Tonight was supposed to be a fun one, but I spoiled it by saying those words to her. I drove into the apartment, parked in the parking space, and left the car. I walked over to Nora's side and opened the door for her. Thank you, she whispered, and we both walked to the door. Luis wasn't in, so I took out the keys and unlocked the door before we both went in. When we got in, she sat on the couch and began taking off her shoes. I watched her slowly stand on her feet and try to make her way to the stairs, but I stopped her. Let me help, I said, and without waiting for a response, I lifted her up from the floor and carried her in my arms while she wrapped her hands around my neck and held my gaze. She looked at me with so much emotion in her eyes, some were that of pain, while some were of anger. But I also noticed she looked at me with love. You are beautiful, I praised and pushed the door open. While holding her gaze, I gently laid her on the bed, but she wrapped her hand around my neck and held my gaze. You have beautiful eyes, she praised, and I smiled. But they are also filled with pain, she murmured while I held her gaze, wondering if she was drunk. I'm not drunk, she announced, as if she was reading my thoughts, and I chuckled and ran my fingers on her cheek and down to her lips. I watched her close her eyes to my touch and slightly open her lips, but I stopped and tried leaving the bed, but she held me back. Please touch me, she pleaded and opened her eyes. I could see the desire for me in her eyes, but I was scared. I was scared that she might be drunk or I might lose control. Please, she pleaded, you might be drunk. I tried speaking, but she cut in, fine, I'll go to Alpha Leo then. She threatened with a frown and looked away. What did you say? I asked with jealousy, and she turned and held my gaze. I'll go to Alpha. I did not allow her to complete her words before slamming my lips against hers. She groaned in the kiss and deepened it. As we kissed, I could taste the alcohol she had taken a few minutes ago. The kiss was filled with passion, and I knew I had to withdraw, but she pulled me to herself and broke the kiss. Were you planning on leaving? She asked, and I sighed and placed a kiss on her forehead. I can't control myself around you, you drive me crazy, I groaned, and she sealed her lips with mine and pulled away. Please, she pleaded with those eyes that I couldn't say no to. With a smile, I got down from the bed and began taking off the buttons from my shirt while she bit her lips and held my gaze. In a swift motion, I took off my clothes, unzipped my pants, and took them off, leaving me in just my white underwear. She lowered her gaze to my underwear and gulped before holding my gaze. "Don't get scared, I'm not using it tonight," I teased, and she smiled shyly. I climbed onto the bed and held her gaze for a moment to see if I would see any resistance in her eyes, but there was none. "What are you thinking?" she asked, and I responded, "I wish you were just mine." I spoke and saw her beam at me. "But I'm all yours for tonight," she responded and placed her hands on my chest, then moved downward to my stomach and stopped there. "You want to touch it?" I asked, and she gulped and shook her head. "Are you a virgin?" I asked, even though I had already gotten my reply from her reaction. "Is it that obvious?" she asked, and I smiled and placed a kiss on the tip of her nose, then moved down to her lips. We kissed passionately, and I pulled away and made her sit on the bed. "Do you want me to stop?" I asked, and she shook her head. "But, don't worry, I won't do. I know the rules, and besides, I wouldn't want your first time to be this way," I said, and she smiled and pulled me for a kiss. "Mhhhh, a moan escaped my lips. "Ah," she moaned loudly and threw her head backward while grinding her body towards me to get more touch from me. I noticed she tried to close her legs, but I grabbed her knees and spread her legs wider. "What are you doing?" she asked, shocked. Forcing me to move my head away from her thighs and look up at her. "What does it look like I'm doing?" I asked. But, you are Lord Madison, you can't, and you are my mate, my better half." I responded, moved up to her, placed a kiss on her lips and moved my lips to her left ear. "Let me taste you," I whispered and felt her shivered. "Nora's POV, let me taste you," he whispered in a husky voice, which brought cold shivers all over my body. He held the hem of my pants and pulled them to my knees before taking them away. Embarrassed, I closed my legs and gulped. I haven't been touched in my private area, let alone been licked. I was nervous and scared. He must have noticed because he took away the strand of hair covering my face and looked straight into my eyes. "You are perfect, and there is nothing to be scared of. Just stay calm and let me taste you," he said, and I nodded shyly. I felt him lick me hungrily as I became wetter and felt my knees shake with pleasure. I heard his soft moan in between my thighs as he moved away from my genitals and moved up to me. "Taste yourself." He didn't let those words leave his mouth before he hurriedly sealed his lips with mine, giving me a taste of myself from his mouth. Hungrily, I pulled him closer to me and deepened the kiss, wanting to taste more of him, but he pulled away, which made me grumble. He met my eyes, and I noticed the intensity of his brown eyes, which seemed darker, almost grey. "You taste delicious," he flashed me a warm smile, lay on the bed beside me, and pulled me towards himself before taking a deep breath. I was angry. I wanted more of his touch, but he just stopped abruptly. "I'm sorry, I can't go further for now," he spoke up, as if he was reading my thoughts. He heaved a sigh and continued, "My wolf is out of control at the moment," he murmured and placed a kiss on my forehead. Grumbling within, I wanted to tell him I could handle him, but I didn't want him to see the desperation in me, so I just took a deep breath and relaxed in his arms. The alluring scent of mint coming from his body intoxicated me, and I found myself inhaling his scent unconsciously. I heard a soft chuckle from him as he pulled me closer and embraced my body. "Do you have enough now?" he teased with a chuckle, which made me roll my eyes and look away. We stayed in each other's arms for almost an hour, and neither of us said a word. If I say I want you all to myself, am I being greedy? He asked, and I couldn't give a response because I didn't know what to say. If only I could turn back the hands of time, he grumbled with a sigh and fell silent again. We both didn't say a word to each other as we pondered our thoughts. My thoughts drifted to the first time he saw me and then to the club when he claimed I wanted to gain his attention, and the thought of it made me laugh. Do you mind sharing? He asked, and I smiled before looking up to hold his gaze. Do you remember in the club when you told me I wanted to get your attention by falling at your side? I said, and he smirked. But I wasn't lying, you wanted my attention, he teased while I scoffed and rolled my eyes and laid my head back on his chest. I didn't even take notice of you, I mumbled and began running the tip of my fingers from his chest to his abs and down to his stomach. You have a nice body, I praised and moved down to his abdomen but stopped with a gulp. You can feel it, he assured me, but I shyly shook my head. I heard him chuckle and hold my hand. Perfection, Lolita growled in my head, causing my cheek to light up with embarrassment. I wanted to pull away, but he held my hands. Please don't stop, he pleaded with a groan, and I obeyed. Slowly, I heard a soft moan from him. I stared at him and smiled, and then a thought came to my mind. I might not have experience in things like this, but I'm a writer, and I know so much. I left his arm and lowered myself on him. What are you trying to do? He asked, and I became confused, but I still responded. I want to. He didn't let me finish. No, please, he said and made me lay back on the bed. You don't have to do it, he said, and I frowned, but you did it to me. Why not let me? I said, and he smiled and placed a kiss on my lips before responding. You are my mate and not some girl I picked in the club, he said while I still remained silent. I know what you are doing. You are trying to return a favor, and I don't want it. Please understand, and besides, I might not be able to control myself if you do that, he spoke, and I furrowed my eyebrows, still confused, and heard him release a heavy sigh and hold both my cheeks. Ladies who blow usually do it to turn me on or put me in the mood if I'm struggling to be in the mood. But with you, I'm already hardened, and I don't see any need for you doing it, he explained, and I nodded and lay back in his arms. I will let it go for now. We both remained silent for a moment before he spoke. Go to sleep. I'll be right here when you wake up. I nodded my head to his words and gradually went to sleep. Goddess! I yelled, opening my eyes and gasping for breath. Nora, are you okay? Lord Madison asked, switching on the light bulb beside the bed. What is wrong? He asked, but I didn't respond. Instead, I left the bed, covering myself with the blanket. Nora! He called, but I didn't reply. Instead, I picked up my underwear from the floor and put them on. Then I grabbed a hoodie and put it on. What's wrong? Lord Madison asked, but I shook my head. Nothing, I just need to be left alone. Please give me some space, I pleaded, and he gave me a confused gaze. Are you panicking? Did you have a nightmare? He asked, and I nodded. But I want to be left alone. I'll go downstairs. Please don't follow me, I begged, waiting for a response, and he nodded. Thank you. I left the room, took the stairs, and arrived at the sitting room. Taking a deep breath, I sat on the couch and closed my eyes, while memories of my dream played in my head like a movie. As I sat on the couch, memories of my dream continued to play in my head like a movie. The details of the dream lingered, and the emotions it evoked remained vivid. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself and make sense of the dream. I saw Alpha Leo lying on the floor in a pool of my blood gasping for air. The dream felt so real that I could feel pain in my chest, precisely where the knife had pierced him. Communicate with him, ask if something is wrong, Lolita suggested in a worried tone, but I remained silent. It was a rule not to communicate with the other person if I'm spending the weekend with one. Stop this, Nora, Lolita pleaded, and taking a deep breath, I made a mind link. Alpha Leo. I called out through telepathy but received no response. Alpha Leo. I called out again, growing uneasy because I sensed something was wrong. Panicking, I raced up the stairs to Lord Madison's room and found him pacing around. Nora, he called out, already dressed. Where are you going? What's wrong? I asked as I approached him. It's Leo, he responded, his face filled with concern. Nora's POV. What is wrong with him? I asked, filled with fear and concern. He was stabbed, Lord Madison announced, causing my breath to seize in my chest. And not just with an ordinary knife, but the knife was poisoned, he added as I gulped and sat on the bed. Panic ran through my entire body, and I didn't know what to do, but I managed to ask, how did he get stabbed? Who was it? I asked in a panic, and Lord Madison heaved a deep sigh before speaking. According to the information I got from his beta, he said they left the pack for a meeting in the next pack, and while in the meeting, a rogue attacked and stabbed Leo. And we don't know who sent him or who it was because Leo burned him to ashes with his abilities, he explained while I remained silent, ignoring the discomfort in my chest. He has been brought back to the pack, and the healers are trying to heal him, but he is losing a lot of blood, and that's why they reached out to me. Then what are we waiting for? Let's hurry, I spoke in panic and began changing my clothes. You can stay back, I'll handle it, Lord Madison suggested, but I shook my head and continued dressing until I was done. I checked the wall clock and realized it was 2 a.m. Let's go, I urged Lord Madison, and he nodded and led the way out of the room. We locked up the apartment and got into his car before he drove off. The drive to the mansion was silent as we both pondered our thoughts. I was scared and panicked, wondering if he was still holding up, and finally, we arrived at the mansion. We both got out of the car and hurried into the sitting room, and without waiting for directions, we took the stairs to Alpha Leo's bedroom, where we saw him lying on the bed, in a pool of his blood, gasping for air. The sight of it got me scared and panicked, and out of impulse, I rushed to him. His eyes were closed, and out of panic, I placed my hands on his bleeding chest and unleashed my abilities. I noticed Lord Madison stood beside me and watched. It's working, Lord Madison announced, and I continued unleashing my abilities until Lolita told me to stop. I opened my eyes and saw that the bleeding had stopped, and his eyes were open. Mine, Lolita howled in relief, and I found myself smiling at him, which he did not return. Instead, he stared at me for a moment, then moved to Lord Madison and then to his beta and mother, who were all in the room. Are you okay? Lady Christabel asked, and he didn't respond. Instead, he looked down at his once wounded chest and heaved a deep breath before holding my gaze. Thank you, he spoke in a cold tone and tried to leave the bed. His beta tried stopping him, but he refused and left the bed. We all watched him take out a new shirt and began putting it on. Where are you going? You're not strong, and it's late, Lady Christabel pleaded, and he responded, saying, I'm just going out to the woods, he said, turning to me and Lord Madison. Thanks for helping. You guys can stay in the mansion until morning, he said, but Lord Madison declined. We can go back home, he said, and Alpha Leo nodded and walked away without looking my way. I wanted to ignore his behavior, but I couldn't. "I'll be back," I told Lord Madison, and went after Alpha Leo. I caught up with him in the living room, and he turned to me. "Is there a problem?" he asked. I held his gaze for a moment and realized his eyes were filled with pain. He was doing his best to hide it from me. "Where are you going?" "You need to relax," I said, finding myself getting worried about him. "I'm fine, don't worry about me," he said and turned to leave, but I blocked his path. "What is wrong?" I asked and saw him close his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath before opening them. "I can't breathe," he said, holding his chest. "I can't breathe when I'm around you, Nora." He sucked in a deep breath and took a step away. "Today, I was stabbed, but the pain I feel in my chest can't be compared to what I feel in my heart. It feels like my heart is being torn apart," he mumbled in pain. Then I realized what he meant. He must have felt it when I was with Lord Madison. "I have to go," he said and hurried away while I just stood there, not knowing what to feel about it. I heard a noise, turned around, and saw Lord Madison. "Are you okay?" he asked, and I nodded. "Let's go," he said and led the way. We got to the car, and the drive was silent until Lord Madison spoke. "Did he tell you what's wrong with him?" he asked, and I shook my head, not wanting to bring up the discussion. I rested my head on the window and closed my eyes. I was supposed to be happy about this, but deep down, I felt pity for Alpha Leo, and I hated it. We arrived at the apartment, walked up to the room, and I decided to take a warm bath. Without saying a word to Lord Madison, I entered the bathroom, took off my clothes, and stood under the running shower. A sigh of relief left my lips as I felt the water splashing on my body, but suddenly I felt a presence behind me. Before I could turn around, hands wrapped around my waist, and a kiss was placed on my neck. Lord Madison's POV. I understood why she had been quiet since we left the mansion. She must be feeling worried or guilty, and I worry for her. I knew it wasn't easy to be mated to two dominant men, and the thought of that might have really scared her. With a sigh, I took off my clothes and hesitated for a moment, wondering if she would like the idea of us bathing together, but Darren urged me to go, so I obeyed. When I walked into the bathroom, I met her back to me, and I couldn't help but stare at her. She had a nice shape, I couldn't ignore. I found myself wrapping my hands around her waist and placing a kiss on her neck. "Do you mind if I join?" I asked, and she only shook her head, permitting me to stay. I smiled to myself and began running kisses all over her back, moving my hands down to her and squeezing them. They felt so soft and big that I groaned and turned her over. I saw her close her eyes as the water splashed on her face. The sight of that brought a familiar feeling to my stomach. With a satisfied sigh, I washed my body, turned off the shower, and wrapped a towel around my waist before leaving the bathroom. I walked into the room and found Nora already dressed in her nightwear. She held my gaze for a moment and looked away. I smiled. We lay beside each other and held each other's gaze. "You have beautiful eyes," I praised and saw her blush and turn her back to me. It was obvious she was shy, so I moved closer to her and wrapped my hand around her waist. "Good night," I whispered and placed a kiss on the back of her neck before drifting to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, Nora wasn't in bed, and the room was empty. I left the bed and checked the bathroom, but it was also empty. I washed my face in the sink and left the room. I took the stairs to the living room, and she wasn't there either, not even in the kitchen. Just as I was about to make a mind link with her, the door opened, and she walked in, sweating profusely. As I stared at her, I couldn't help but be captivated by Nora's appearance. Dressed in sport shorts, revealing her beautiful full legs, a pair of sneakers, and a black singlet, it was clear that she had been out running. Beads of sweat adorned her forehead, and her cheeks were flushed with exertion. She looked alive, vibrant, and absolutely stunning. "Good morning," I greeted her with a smile, unable to hide my admiration. "You look incredible." Nora's breath was slightly labored as she replied, "Good morning, Lord Madison." "Thank you." She seemed a little surprised by my compliment, but I meant every word of it. "Did you go for a run?" I asked, already aware of the answer. "Yes," she replied, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. "I do this every Saturday." "That's impressive. I should join you sometime," I said, and she smiled and walked toward the kitchen. I stood at the door and watched her take out a bottle of water from the fridge, poured some into a glass, and drank from it. "Maybe we should go out, watch a movie, and do other outdoor activities," I suggested, and she nodded and turned to me. "Sure, so where do we start from?" she asked. "We bathe and go out to eat breakfast, and from there we can plan other activities," I said, and she nodded in agreement. "I'll go bathe then," she beamed and walked away, while I stood in the kitchen with a smile. I was happy to be with her, but then a frown appeared on my face when I realized she would be spending the next weekend with Leo. It seemed that our time together would be cut short, and jealousy started to creep into my mind. However, I knew I had to push those negative emotions aside and focus on the present moment. After Nora finished her bath, we both got ready and headed out to have breakfast together. As we sat in a cozy cafe, enjoying our meal, I decided to put aside my concerns and live in the present. I engaged in light-hearted conversations, making her laugh and enjoying her company. "So you were scared of dogs, Lord Madison? Scared of dogs? Unbelievable," she laughed loudly and closed her mouth. "I was just 6, I responded, and she laughed, mocking. "Still doesn't change the fact that you, Lord Madison, feared dogs," she teased while I smiled and took a sip of my coffee. As I watched her laugh loudly at the story I had just told her, I looked at her and realized that I had fallen in love with her. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.